Shark Media.
Welcome back to TV in the Basement, your dungeon for all things fantasy, horror, and drama. I'm your host, Journey Joe Mitchell, and today we're going back to where it all began, the groundbreaking first season of HBO's Game of Thrones. Based on George R.R. Martin's best-selling novel A Game of Thrones premiered in April 2011 and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. The show's intricate plotting, morally complex characters, and shocking twists and turns captivated audiences around the world and set a new standard for what was possible in televised fantasy storytelling. Set in the fictional continents of Westeros and Essos, Game of Thrones follows the intertwining storylines of several noble families vying for control of the Iron Throne, the seat of the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. At the center of the conflict are the Starks, led by the Honorable Eddard Stark, played by Sean Bean, and the Lannisters, a wealthy and ruthless family headed by the cunning Tywin Lannister, played by Charles Dance. As the season unfolds, we are introduced to a sprawling cast of characters, each with their own motivations, secrets, and agendas. There's Daenerys Targaryen, played by Emilia Clarke, the exiled daughter of a deposed king who seeks to reclaim her birthright with the help of her 3 newly hatched dragons. There's Jon Snow, played by Kit Harington, Ned Stark's illegitimate son who joins the Night's Watch, a military order tasked with guarding the realm from the threats beyond the Wall. And there's Tyrion Lannister, played by Peter Dinklage in a career-defining performance, a dwarf whose wit and intellect make him a formidable player in the Game of Thrones. One of the strengths of Game of Thrones' first season is the way it balances its many storylines and characters, giving each one room to breathe and develop while still maintaining a sense of forward momentum and tension. The show's writers, led by showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, do an excellent job of adapting Martin's dense and sometimes unwieldy source material into a streamlined and compelling television narrative. This is particularly evident in the show's handling of the Stark family, whose honorable and straightforward nature often puts them at a disadvantage in the cutthroat world of Westerosi politics. Sean Bean's performance as Ned Stark is a standout, capturing the character's nobility and integrity while also hinting at the darkness and tragedy that awaits him. Another strength of the season is its world building, which immerses viewers in the rich and detailed universe of Westeros and beyond. From the icy wastes beyond the Wall to the sun-drenched cities of Essos, the show's production design, costumes, and visual effects create a fully realized and immersive fantasy world that feels both familiar and utterly unique. The show's attention to detail, from the intricate heraldry of the noble houses to the gritty realism of the battle scenes, helps to ground the more fantastical elements of the story in a believable and compelling reality. Of course, Game of Thrones is also known for its shocking and sometimes controversial moments, and the first season has its fair share of them. The show's depiction of violence and sexuality, particularly its use of nudity and sexual violence, has been a source of debate and criticism from the very beginning. Some viewers and critics have argued that the show's graphic content is gratuitous and exploitative, while others have defended it as a necessary and honest portrayal of the brutal realities of life in a medieval-inspired fantasy world. One of the most talked-about moments in the first season is the scene in which Daenerys is raped by her new husband Khal Drogo, played by Jason Momoa, on their wedding night. The scene is difficult to watch and has been criticized by some as an unnecessary and potentially harmful depiction of sexual assault. However, others have argued that the scene is an important part of Daenerys' character arc, showing the trauma and abuse she endures before ultimately rising to become a powerful and transformative leader in her own right. Another controversial moment in the season is the revelation of Cersei and Jaime Lannister's incestuous relationship, which is discovered by Bran Stark, played by Isaac Hempstead Wright in the first episode. The scene, which features Jaime pushing Bran out of a window to protect their secret, is a shocking and unsettling moment that sets the tone for the moral ambiguity and darkness that will come to define the series. Despite these controversies, Game of Thrones' first season was a critical and commercial success, winning numerous awards and accolades and cementing its status as one of the most talked about and influential television shows of the decade. The show's cast and crew were praised for their work, with particular attention being paid to the performances of Sean Bean, Peter Dinklage, and Emilia Clarke, as well as the show's writing, directing, and visual effects. The season's most memorable episodes include the premiere, which introduces us to the world of Westeros and the key players in the Game of Thrones. The seventh episode, You Win or You Die, which features a shocking betrayal and a game-changing power shift. And the season finale, Fire and Blood, which sets the stage for the wars and conflicts to come with a series of stunning revelations and cliffhangers. Looking back on the first season of Game of Thrones, it's clear that the show was a groundbreaking and transformative work of television that redefined what was possible in the fantasy genre. By combining the epic scope and world-building of classic fantasy with the moral complexity and character-driven storytelling of prestige drama, Game of Thrones created a new template for what a fantasy series could be and paved the way for a new era of ambitious and boundary-pushing genre television. Of course, the show was not without its flaws and controversies, and there will undoubtedly be debates and discussions about its legacy and impact for years to come. But there's no denying the cultural significance and influence of Game of Thrones, particularly in its first season, which set the stage for the phenomenon to come and introduced millions of viewers around the world to the rich and fascinating world of Westeros. As we look back on the show's first season, it's interesting to see how many of the themes and storylines that would come to define the series were already present from the very beginning. The power struggles and political machinations of the noble families, the looming threat of the White Walkers and the armies of the dead, the complex and often tragic relationships between parents and children, and the question of what it means to be a good and just ruler in a world of violence and chaos. All of these elements were already in place in the show's first 10 episodes, laying the groundwork for the epic saga that would unfold over the course of 8 seasons. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Game of Thrones' first season is the way it changed the landscape of television and popular culture more broadly. By proving that a fantasy series could be just as smart, sophisticated, and emotionally resonant as any other prestige drama, Game of Thrones opened the door for a new wave of genre programming that pushed the boundaries of what was possible on the small screen. From Westworld and Stranger Things to The Witcher and The Mandalorian, the influence of Game of Thrones can be seen in countless shows that have followed in its wake, each one building on the foundation laid by this groundbreaking and unforgettable first season. So what did you think of Game of Thrones' first season? Did it live up to the hype, or did it leave you wanting more? What were your favorite moments, characters, and storylines? And what do you think the show's legacy will be in the years and decades to come? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you'd like to receive episodes of this podcast commercial-free, as well as the other programs from Calaroga Shark Media, including a show I think you'd love called Monsters, Sharks, and Dinosaurs, alongside daily comedy news, 5 good news stories, 5 daily trivia questions, and a whole lot more, open up the Apple Podcasts app and find this show and hit subscribe. It's just $4.99 a month, and you can test drive it for 30 days for free. Until next time, keep watching the skies, the screens, and your own backs. Because in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. Thank you for listening.